Hello everyone, back tuning in today's first video doing JMA Friday. As always on a Friday, we'll have a look at weather for the next month with Japanese and CFS B2 models. This afternoon, we'll have a look at weather for the next week to 10 days. Some quite interesting weather coming up next week. It looks very unsettled, and I think it will turn a bit colder, so it might be a little bit of wintry weather up in the north. And I'll have more about that as we go through in today's second video. We'll deal with JMA Friday first of all, so it's going to take us to the middle part of April. With Japanese and CFS B2 models, and I'll get on with that for you in a second. Before I get on with that, though, just to say that the websites that we use for JMA Friday, you can find the links to them on the links page, so you can check out these charts yourself if you would like to do that. So we're going to start off with the 500 millibar height anomalies from the Japanese model, looking at the northern hemisphere view down. This is the pole just here, so that's where the North Pole is. British Isles is just here in the mid-latitudes, of course. Now, with these charts, blue is extrapolating to low pressure, and yellow, orange, brighter colours extrapolates to high pressure. So this is the anomaly for next week. This is taking us from the 17th through to the 24th of March. You find we've got below average heights to the north and west of us, and a ridge is down to the south, which means that the flow and the jet stream is coming in from off the Atlantic. So that looks quite Atlantic driven, quite unsettled. There'd be a fair amount of rain at times up in the north and west. The driest of the conditions would be in the south. Temperatures overall fairly mild. We go through to week 2, which is taken us from the 24th through to the 31st of March. We see quite a significant change with this one. The below average heights become stuck in the middle part of the Atlantic, and we get a ridge building over and to the east of the country. The jet stream and the flow is going something like that. So we are being placed on the mild side of a jet there, and that could be very pleasant actually. Quite a burst of spring perhaps for the final week of March if that was to come off. We'd be drawing up the air from the southeast. You could very easily get easterly winds, of course, with that. But I think we'd more or less be drawing up the air from the southeast, which at the end of March is going to be quite warm and fairly dry with a decent amount of sunshine. A nice spell of spring weather coming up there. And then into the first 2 weeks of April, this is weeks 3 and 4, which takes us from the 31st of March through to the 14th of April. We've had quite a significant change taking place again. The ridge now is through the central part of the Atlantic, and then we've got below average heights to our east, which implies that we're probably doing something a bit like that with the flow and the jet stream. We're probably being placed on the cold side of a jet stream there, and we could be pulling in the air from the north or the northeast. So we go through to the early part of April, and it does look like it could be quite a lot colder, potentially quite unsettled down in the south as well. So cold and unsettled perhaps as we go through into the start of April, perhaps a little bit surprisingly. Let's have a look at the temperature and precipitation anomalies that go with those heights. This is the mid-latitude and tropical view. The equator, of course, is just there, and then the northern hemisphere is here. The southern hemisphere, I should say, is there, and then the North Pole and, of course, the South Pole, they are off the charts down there. And the British Isles, just so you know where we are, we're in the top right-hand corner of the chart as you're looking at it, right? Everybody knows where everyone is. For the coming week, this is the week 1 anomaly in terms of 500 millibar heights. This takes us from the 17th through 24th of March. We find we've got the ridge down to the south and southwest, low pressures up to the north, and we're bringing the air through from off the Atlantic. So you expect this to be fairly mild week. That's what the model is suggesting. Temperature anomalies are coming out milder than average, particularly so for the south, where we're between around 1 and 2 degrees above average. For precipitation, southern areas look drier, northern areas look wetter. So it's a little bit more unsettling in the north and west. It's driest in the south and in the southeast. We go through to week 2, which is the 24th through to 31st March, the last week of March, and we have that ridge building over and to our east, which looks like it should be placing us on the warm side of the jet, and temperature anomalies here are coming out very significantly milder than average for this final week of March, so quite a warm end to what will be a very mild March. The precipitation anomalies, they are coming out more or less drier than average, although Ireland is a little bit wetter, but most parts of the UK are actually coming out slightly drier than average for the final week of March. That looks really very pleasant for the final week of March. And then change again as we go through to the first 2 weeks of April, going from the 31st of March through to the 14th of April. We find we have this ridge setting up out to the west of the country with a trough to the east, which you will think is probably pulling the winds in from a north or maybe even a northeasterly wind. So does these 2 weeks turn colder? Yes, they do. The temperature anomaly is dropping. And for England and Wales, you probably can't make it out that well, but for England and Wales, it is going a bit colder than average. Most parts of Europe, certainly Central Europe, turning colder than average as well through those first 2 weeks of April. And the precipitation anomalies are almost coming out drier than average, a little bit wetter than average down to the south. Notice again, most central parts of Europe are turning wetter than average. So I think the implication is a lot of fairly mild and dryish weather through to the end of March, and then probably colder and more unsettled as we get through to the early part of April. I think that is a signal from today's Japanese update. What about CFS V2? Again, these are 500 millibar heights, broken down into week periods. The first week period takes us from the 17th through the 23rd of March. So we've got low pressure up to our north, we've got the ridge, which is down to the south, and the flow and the jet streams going through like that. So both models are in agreement that this third week of March is going to be unsettled, it's going to be Atlantic driven. The most unsettled weather is in the north and west, but dry-ish, but not completely dry, weather is down in the south and the east. Now, week 2 shows a change. The JMA at this point, this is from the 24th through to the 30th of March, the JMA wanted to build that area of above average heights over and to the east. The CFS V2 keeps the above average heights centred over and to the southwest. It doesn't really make a lot of difference in terms of the actual weather because it looks still very mild and we are placed on the mild side of the jet. It's just a slight difference in terms of the placement of that ridge. But I think both models, depending on which one you take, both models are in agreement that it'll be a fairly warm and dry end to March. It's just they differ exactly on how we get there. And then we go through to week 3, which is the 31st of March through to the 6th of April. And very similar conditions, really. The above average heights are still in there around just to the south and southwest of the country. The below average heights up to the north. We're placed on the mild side of the jet. So that looks like a continuation of mostly dry and quite warm conditions, certainly very mild conditions, going through into the start of April. Remember, at this point, the JMA is starting to turn things colder and more unsettled. No sign of that with this morning's CFS update. So for weeks 3 and 4, they are disagreeing because the CFS from the 7th through to the 13th of April, week 4, just has that area of above average heights. Again, it's through the country, ridging through like that. Again, we're placed on the mild side of the jet stream. There's no trough to the east, to the south of us. So it's just a continuation of very dry, I would have thought, and quite warm conditions into the first half of April. So disagreements this morning between the JMA and the CFS in terms of what's going to happen as we get through into April. They are sort of in agreement for the rest of March, although even by week 2, the final week of March, they are differing a little bit in terms of the exact placement of the ridge. But the general signal for warmer, drier for this end of March is there, but they are disagreeing a lot for April. Temperature anomalies with CFS V2 for the next week. This going from the 17th to 23rd of March comes out warmer than average. We'll wrap through these very quickly because you can guess what they're going to show. Week 2, which is the last week of March, that's coming out warmer than average as well. Week 3, which is the first week of April, that one also is coming out warmer than average. And week 4 rounds it all off. This is the second week of April, the 7th through to 13th of April. That one comes out very significantly mild milder than average as well. So a warm, really warm month of it. Continuing the warmth that we've had through February and March as well. A really warm month coming up to middle part of April. And the precipitation, so the next week looks a little bit wetter than average through most parts of the country. Driest, but not totally dry conditions down in the south. Week 2, however, that's as the ridge is reasserting itself from the southwest. That one turns drier than average pretty much everywhere. And then week 3, although the signal is weakening, week 3, the first week of April, that also coming out more or less drier than average. Week 4, again, the signal is weakening, but it's still there to be generally quite dry. Most parts of Europe also coming out quite dry as well. So we've got disagreements for April with today's JMA Friday. Now we can say that the rest of March we have got fairly good agreement in terms of the temperature and precipitation anomalies. They differ a bit on how we get these temperature and precipitation anomalies, but the overall signal is to remain generally quite mild and dry. Interestingly, they're not really picking up on that northerly snap that it looks like we might get next week, and I'll have more about that in today's second video. But the overall signal from both models for the rest of March is generally quite mild and dry. April is a big disagreement between the two of them. The JMA looks significantly colder and more unsettled through the early part of April. CFS says no, we just keep the conditions we've had through February and March, which is generally quite warm and pretty dry as well. So we'll know more next week, of course, when we do next week's JMA Friday, which way this is going to go as we get through into April. Right, come back later on and we'll have a look at where next week's 10 days, see if there's any sign of northerly winds next week. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.